on and was before council may have been passed. What they may have passed something else that we thought was the document that we were working on.
That sounds like a lot of money to extend FMLA benefits for a year.
Try to estimate what this may cost the city to continue to provide this benefit. Uh, no one had provided that or conducted that type of analysis, and I don't think they took that into consideration.
Did the city pass the resolution over your objection?
No, that one was pulled, but we're still back to the original policy, and I don't think that has been passed yet either. I'm pretty sure it hasn't.
When you say original policies, is that the one that your team drafted?
Correct. And it wasn't just my team. We worked hand in hand with the city's chief operating officer and HR personnel.
You also mentioned the lack of controls or internal controls rather in the finance department. Can you tell us what that means?
Yeah, I'm also well, I am a certified public accountant, so this is really of interest to me or particular focus. Um, and yes.
I, I think he is. I know he told me earlier he had to step away if he turned his camera off. No, I know that he had to step away.
I'm sorry about that.
Thank you, Scott.
So with the internal controls in finance, it's common to follow or try to implement what's known as the COSO framework. COSO stands for Committee of Sponsoring Organizations. But the framework concept is I guess I back up a second. There's no one right way to do this or one right way to set up an accounting practice or a finance department. So it's taking the factors into consideration of the size of the organization, the number of employees in the area, the control environment. You do risk assessments, try to implement some control activities, monitoring, reporting, compliance, operation. You pull these factors all together to come up with what is the best way to implement internal controls in any environment. And so in the finance area for the city of Chester, we're dealing with significant deficiencies in reporting, adhering to compliance measures. Um, and it kind of, with all of this, it starts at the top. And if the control environment isn't right, if you don't have the proper personnel in place coupled with the proper policies, it's you're going to be spinning your wheels, and it's evident by the lack of. We cited a few things in the plan modification that go to the ability to implement cash flow reporting, um, the issues with late payments to the IRS, mistakes with tax payments that had mounted to $1 million in penalties with the IRS. Current balance is about 750, but that's only because payments have been made against that account balance. Um, so losing 750,000 potentially in penalties and fees obviously negatively impact the city's ability to recover. Phishing incidents where there's lack of separation, et cetera. So the lack of internal controls is bled into, I shouldn't say bled into, it's really impacted our ability, the city's ability to recover.
And how often do you meet with the city elected officials?
Uh, I meet with Mayor Kirkland and Councilman Morgan on a weekly basis, same meeting. Also, our team meets with the finance with Councilman Morgan on a weekly basis, separate meeting. We meet with Councilman Morgan and Solicitor Ken Schuster on a weekly basis. That's a separate meeting. Then on the operations side, we call it the capital scrum, but there's a capital projects meeting once a week. And then there are some smaller meetings that are held in addition to the ad hocs, but there's routine meetings with every area of city government throughout the week, regular meetings, excuse me.
And during these meetings, that's the opportunity for the city officials or the department heads to tell you if there are any issues that's going on.
Correct.
And we heard a lot about the $400,000 phishing scam, and you just mentioned some others, like the IRS delayed payments. Have you learned about those issues during these meetings?
No, no, it's next to never that the city raises any issues in those meetings. No, let me take that back. It's in in the meetings with the mayor and Councilman Morgan, it's rare for anything of substance to be brought up from the city side. And the other meetings with legal, where Chief Operating Officer Leitner sets the agenda, there are items advanced from the city side. And in the finance meeting where Protivity leads the finance discussion, Protivity advances agenda items. But to these critical problems or as they arise, they are not advanced in the recovery plan meetings that we have weekly with the mayor.
Um, in your opinion, would something like the phishing scam and the loss of the $400,000 could have been avoided if the city had these controls in place?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. With the phishing scam that the city was subject to, it wasn't just a bait and click kind of a scam. It was someone or Councilman Morgan received a request and he did not take the time and effort to properly handle the request. So in accounting with this segregation of duties, we refer to it as the ABCs of accounting. The ABCs stand for authorization, bookkeeping, and control. So the control in this instance, would be the person who receives the communication, usually procurement or accounts payable clerk. Um, that person doesn't have the authority to um, withdraw funds from the city's account, nor are they responsible for the bookkeeping. So in this instance, the control was skipped because it went straight to Councilman Morgan, and Councilman Morgan unilaterally authorized the payment and did not see through it for the proper bookkeeping. So the ABCs were just completely mishandled. The only way that this was found was that PFM, our financial consultant, and their cash flow forecasting caught the $400,000 transaction, didn't know what they had at the time, but as we went to reconcile line items, the city and others started to see that this $400,000 anomaly in this line item was causing it to go over, and from there they were able to figure out what happened. But this was months later.
And is one of the goals of this revised, modified plan to make sure that those ABCs of accounting and segregation of duties are put in place?
Absolutely, and most first and foremost is getting a chief financial officer in place that is competent and actually can lead these efforts on a day-to-day.
Mr. Dowie, could you explain to me what should have been done, what the steps should have been done when the first phishing email was sent or call? I'm not an accountant, so what would have been best practices?
Right. So I view Councilman Morgan as at the top of the org chart. It's typical to have a company CFO or someone from the board or CEO to be the actual signer on a check, right? So you've seen checks that have two signatures at the bottom of them, at the bottom of it. The person who's actually cutting the check is not one of the signers. And that segregation helps with control where you have a second set of eyes. So I may have the ability to print a check for the city, but I wouldn't have the ability to sign it. So you put custody in one person's hands, custody of the transaction, that's the control. But you put the authorization in someone else's hands. And that from either of those two arms, that information gets fed back into the person who does the bookkeeping. So in the segregation, you want to have three different people involved with the transaction, especially of this magnitude, but it really works with any transaction, even if it were only $10. The someone has custody, another person has the ability to authorize, and then someone else is taking care of the record keeping. So in Chester's example, an accounts payable clerk would receive the request to pay the invoice. That person would go to the authorized signers, CFO, councilman, whoever are the authorized signers. That person in control would go to them to get the authorization to make the payment. But then all of that information would be fed to yet another person to keep the books and keep a record of what happened. So, and Chester's, in this particular instance, uh, Councilman Morgan functioned as the person with control or the custody. He also functioned as the authorizer. And then I can't really say that he saw it through to the end to even impact the bookkeeping because it showed up on PFM's report, not on a city report. So PFM caught it somehow through their review of check registers and what have you. Well, no, it couldn't have been that. I'm not sure how PFM caught it, but does that explain the separation there?
I do. I understand. Thank you.
Thank you.
And you also mentioned the personnel issues. Can you go through those issues that you've experienced?
Yeah, we had talked for a second about the investigations and the lack of cooperation. Another issue we're dealing with is nepotism. There's significant relationships that aren't disclosed, that aren't um, managed appropriately. As you know, on smaller organizations or smaller communities, it's not uncommon for conflicts to arise, but they need to be mitigated and addressed appropriately. In Chester, we dealt with the son-in-law of the mayor being the chief of staff, the HR directors, if we don't have the appropriate personnel in place to implement them on it and implement them on a day-to-day.
And again, is that one of the goals of this modified plan to put professionals in place that will implement and enforce the policies that you and your team come up with?
Yes, absolutely.
Did you attempt to advance any of these revisions to the employee handbook or ethics to the mayor or city council? Have you presented them with plans?
I have not presented an ethics policy, but we have presented the revised employee handbook and and I want to say that there are some other HR policies that we've presented that haven't been advanced. But I offhand, it would be the employee handbook that stands out the most.
And there's just been no response, or has there been back and forth? What happened to your uh, presentations to them on these issues, or your memos, or your reports?
They fall on deaf ears. There will be working sessions where it sounds like we're all in favor of advancing it, but transitioning from the staff level to council approval, somewhere in there, the process, it dies.
Okay.
Um, Mr. Dowry, why is transparency with your team important?
Why is transparency important? I'm sorry, just jump back to the last one. I just would mention the FMLA policy is another HR policy that we've tried to advance and haven't been able to. I'm sorry, Ms. Allen, could you repeat the question?
Yes, I was asking about transparency with your team. Why is it important?
Oh, it's critical. Well, the first thing I would say is city finances. It's real time impact. Um, our understanding of the cash flow and what the city really has available, uh, it's real time. This 2 weeks ago, we were pretty to not being able to make a payroll run. So really getting in and being able to see the numbers real time, what's going on, and being able to adjust, if you will, mid-year to make adjustments to the budget or to spending to allocations is critical. But the I would also challenge that it's the community engagement side of it or meeting with the public. Part of a good bit of the last 2.5 years I spent outside of City Hall, really engaging the public to understand to help the public understand the severity of the issues and the severity of some of the decisions, the significance of some of the decisions that need to be made to for Chester to achieve this recovery. So everyone's understanding of what's going on inside of City Hall, how distressed things are, what the funding levels are, and the pension plans, et cetera. If we're not open and transparent on those things, it leads to not just the conspiracy theories, but it 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 prohibits the ability for us to come together and work on collective solutions.
And I want to back up a bit because I don't,
Inhibits.
I'm sorry.
I said prohibits. I meant to say inhibits. You wanted to back up a bit? I'm sorry.
Yeah, I wanted to back up a bit because I don't want to minimize the situation where you mentioned that there were threats. How does hearing threats from city officials or name calling that you're supposed to work with affect you?
Um, the effect to me is the concern for others. As I very much view myself as an extension of this court, an extension of the Commonwealth. So as a state, if I may say, a state official coming into Chester to do business to help, if I'm being met in this way, then I can only imagine what employees may feel, how they may be treated, other consultants, what have you. So
Objection, Your Honor, speculation.
This is his, it'll be overruled. These are his thoughts. These are his feelings and how it affects him. Continue.
thank you. So it becomes very real in our ability to manage or hold others accountable. When a rank and file employee or staff member says, you know, I want to do this or I know this to be right, but it, it gives credibility to their concern. So how does it make me feel? I'm okay. I'll be okay. But our ability to turn things around, to be supportive of employees, our ability to really sit down to the table and work collectively to advance an agenda. Um, I, I I have concerns about all of that across the board.
And have all of these challenges that you just discussed impacted your ability to carry out your duties under Act 47?
Yes.
How?
Well, how is it impacted? I would speak to, well, our inability to have a productive working session. It's hit or miss on whether or not the mayor is going to be cooperative and participate even in a meeting. He'll show up sometimes and not say anything, and absolutely nothing. And other times he shows up and it could potentially be a fight. So which session is really going to be productive? And it's hit or miss. But then the other side of it is the lack of planning from the city side. So it's not like both parties are coming in with some ideas and then we're trying to figure out how we can work together or compromise. It's our side advancing this is what we think is a plan and a path forward, and then the other side just sitting back and taking shots. So it becomes detrimental, or I shouldn't say defeats the purpose, but there's certainly not productive engagement. Um, and then, like I said about the holding staff accountable, I want to be supportive of the chief operating officer and his ability to hold his new staff accountable and implement initiatives that he's seen are necessary. But our ability to really hold employees accountable when they're telling us, "I'm fearful of X, Y, and Z," it becomes a challenge.
And just so we can clarify, you as the receiver and your team, you have attempted to have sit down meetings with the city electeds.
Yes, I initiated the weekly meetings with Mayor Kirkland every Wednesday, and despite whatever may be going on, we keep the meeting on the agenda, on the calendar, unless there's a scheduling conflict that arises for whatever reason. We honor that day and show up. No matter what may have happened the week before in City Hall, we come back again and try again.
And if the issue arises with the operations of the city, you attempt to have meet and discuss sessions or see how you two can come together and have a mutual plan.
Absolutely, absolutely. Our engagement with Chief Leitner has been great. The city COO is really been a great find, um, and we continue to work together, no matter what contention may be with the elected officials. We're continuing to press forward. So there's always going to be the next thing for us to try and advance that has nothing to do with whatever blew up the week before. So we continue to press forward, and we can continue to engage the electeds to try to advance the city.
And despite these efforts over the past 2.5 years, um, you still meet challenges with getting initiatives completed or even started.
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
I said, despite your efforts to meet with the city officials and to get things done, you're still experiencing challenges.
Yes, yes. And I want to add in that there's I'm fishing for the right word. I don't know to describe it as a philosophical difference, or I may be reaching there, but in my opinion, it's selling the water system in and by itself is not the solution for the city of Chester. Restructuring needs to happen, financial restructuring, improvements to operations, improvements on the city's ability to deliver those vital and necessary services has to happen. Selling the water system in and by itself will not accomplish all of that, at least not for any sustainable period of time. So, on one hand, you have the tone at the top being the mayor in denial and telling folks we're okay, we just need to do X and everything will be fine. That undermines everything that we're trying to do when we're saying you have to figure out how to do more with less. You have to continue to try to be more efficient. We have to bring the creditors to the table and really work out a better deal, a path forward. Um, I mean, for what it's worth, for the city electeds to uh, object to the city's eligibility to insolvency when only one creditor did that, not the unions, not the retirees, et cetera, really just speaks to just we're not sending the same message to the city as a whole and or the staff. So you have that at the top, and then you couple that with elected officials just inability to really function as department heads. In particular, code enforcement, the licensing and inspection area. We know that there are receivables that are significant that haven't been invoices that haven't been even been mailed out. We're dealing with the turnover of department heads where in 2021, Councilman Jacobs was the head. In 22, Councilwoman Williams was the head. Now in 23, Councilwoman Man, Roots is the head. That turnover doesn't help in our attempts to create a control environment, internal controls, but then also build upon some consistency and get some momentum moving forward. So it's been challenging.
And is that why you filed the modifications to the amended recovery plan?
Absolutely. Senior level managers need to be empowered to lead these departments and in a professional manner.
Mr. Dowry, we heard yesterday that there was a move from, I forget what his name was, but he went from one position to economic development. They didn't want to lay him off.
Mr. Starr?
This is the gentleman that got the liquor license.
Mhm.
What did he do for an economic development for the year or so that he was in that position?
In that year, I'm not sure what he accomplished. I know he personally acquired several downtown properties during that time period. But what was done to advance economic developments on behalf of the city, I don't know. And as he previously served as the city's chief of staff, he definitely was not meeting the mark there.
So when he was put in that 80-some thousand dollar a year position, he didn't issue reports or meet with you, or besides getting his own properties, you're not aware of anything else?
That's correct.
Your
Okay.
Honor, I'm finished my questioning of Mr. Dowry, unless you have anything else.
No, I'll wait for Mr. Pfeiffer.